The galaxy had rules, and humanity broke them. That was the first truth whispered through the corridors of alien embassies and echoing across the grand chambers of the Galactic Council. To the Council, humans were too ambitious, too restless, too unpredictable to be trusted with the delicate balance of interstellar order. They called us reckless pioneers, accused us of violating accords before we had even signed them. We were denied entry into their so-called Union of Enlightened Civilizations, forbidden from settling beyond the narrow borders of our own solar system. It was a ban meant to shackle us, a sentence of isolation while the rest of the galaxy thrived together. But humanity never learned to kneel quietly. At first, the ban cut deep. Generations grew up knowing the stars belonged to others, while Earth and its colonies on Mars and Luna remained under strict watch. Alien patrols lingered at the edges of our space, reminding us of boundaries we could not cross. Trade was limited, technology exchanges forbidden. In the Council's eyes, we were dangerous children holding matches near powder kegs. But in the hearts of billions, a question grew louder. Why should we ask permission to reach for what was already within our grasp? That question did not stay quiet. It lit fires in labs, shipyards, and hidden stations scattered across the dark edges of human territory. Outwardly, Earth maintained diplomacy, attending council hearings with polite silence. Inwardly, something else stirred. Engineers, dreamers, and soldiers came together under a single unspoken vow to stop begging for a place at the table and instead build a table of our own. If the galaxy would not have us, then humanity would carve its own dominion among the stars. It began small, almost invisible to outsiders. Mining colonies expanded deeper into asteroid belts. Merchant fleets grew in number, slipping through gaps in alien surveillance. Independent research stations, officially unregistered, perfected technologies the Council had banned us from touching. For every door the galaxy slammed shut, humanity built a window in the dark. Slowly, quietly, a network of hidden power emerged, stretching beyond the reach of Council law. And in that silence, a new identity formed, not as outcasts, but as builders of a dominion untouched by alien hands. The Council miscalculated one thing. Pressure does not break humanity. It forges it. Every restriction became fuel. Every insult carved determination deeper into the human spirit. Where other species followed rules like scripture, we treated rules as obstacles waiting to be overcome. That spirit birthed ships unlike anything the Council fleets had ever seen. Fast, resilient, armed with weapons no alien dared to approve. Cities rose in orbit around gas giants, shielded from detection. Entire star systems became sanctuaries of human will, hidden but thriving. The ban intended to cage us only taught us how to master the lock, yet no dominion can remain hidden forever. Rumors began to ripple across the stars. Alien merchants spoke of encountering human caravans far outside approved sectors. Council patrols reported glimpses of warships that should not exist. Whispers grew into unease. Had humanity ignored its exile? Had the forbidden race carved out a kingdom in the shadows? And if so, how powerful had it become? The Council, bound by its own arrogance, hesitated. To acknowledge our rise would mean admitting their failure. So they chose denial, even as our dominion expanded further into the unknown. But within humanity, the weight of choice hung heavy. The dominion was no longer just a dream whispered in secret. It was real, alive, and growing. With every new world colonized, with every fleet launched, we faced a question that cut deeper than any ban. What would we become? Builders of a new order or conquerors feared even more than the Council we had defied. In the vast halls of hidden capitals, leaders debated not just survival, but the shape of a civilization that had never asked permission to exist. For the ordinary people living inside this rising dominion, life was a mixture of wonder and tension. Children grew up beneath skies filled with human ships, not alien patrols. Farmers tilled soil on worlds no Council chart had ever blessed. Workers built machines designed not for compliance, but for independence. Yet beneath the pride there was also unease. Everyone knew the Council would not remain blind forever. The day would come when the galaxy realized humanity had built more than a rebellion. It had built an empire. And when that day came, peace would not be the first outcome. Across these hidden worlds, stories spread of a fleet being assembled, not for defense, but for something greater. It was said the Dominion's leaders had chosen a single flagship to carry humanity's voice into the galaxy, not in words, but in undeniable presence. The ship was whispered about in hushed tones, a vessel built with forbidden technology, a symbol of defiance too large to remain a secret. Some called it a weapon, others called it a beacon. But everyone understood one truth. When it launched, the galaxy would no longer be able to ignore us, and so humanity stood on the edge of a new chapter, balanced between defiance and destiny. The Council believed their ban had tamed us, but in truth it had only sharpened our resolve. Our dominion was no longer a question of survival. It was a reality, ready to step out of the shadows. The galaxy thought it had exiled us, but it had merely given us the space to become something greater. Now the stars are watching, silent and waiting. The Council believes they still hold power, but they do not yet understand the scale of what we have built. Our fleets are hidden, our worlds thriving, our will unbroken. Soon humanity will step forward, not as beggars at the gates of the Council, but as rulers of our own destiny. And when that moment comes, the galaxy will have to answer the question it has avoided for centuries. What happens when the species they tried to silence speaks with the voice of a dominion? The answer waits in the void. Carried by ships, the Council swore we could never build. Guarded by colonies they swore would never exist. But the final choice is yet to be revealed. Will humanity emerge as liberators, offering freedom to others who live under the Council's control? Or will we rise as conquerors, determined to claim the stars for ourselves alone? That choice is coming. The Council does not see it yet, but every human does. We are no longer banned, no longer outcasts. We are builders of our own future, and soon the galaxy will know the full weight of what that means. And somewhere, deep within the Dominion's hidden strongholds, the order has been given. Engines roar to life, shields power on, and a flagship unlike any other prepares to leave its dock. The stars are waiting. The galaxy is unaware, but humanity is ready. The story begins when that ship breaks the silence. The flagship's engines came alive with a low hum, vibrations echoing through the vast shipyard hidden in the shadows of a distant gas giant. To the engineers who had worked in silence for years, the sound was more than machinery. It was proof of what humanity had become. They stood in silence, staring through reinforced glass as the vessel's hull glowed with faint blue light. It wasn't just another warship. It was the embodiment of defiance, the kind of ship no alien council had ever allowed us to dream of. And now it was real. Yet behind the awe, there was fear. Everyone who looked upon the ship knew what it meant. Humanity was no longer just surviving on scraps beyond Council control. We were preparing to step into a role that would change everything, not just for us, but for every species bound under the Galactic Council's laws. The flagship would announce us to the galaxy in a way no words could. But the question that lingered unspoken in every mind was simple. When the galaxy noticed, would they see us as equals or as a threat to be erased? The leaders of the Dominion gathered in hidden halls carved into asteroids and orbital stations. They were not politicians in the old sense, not bound by the fragile bureaucracy of Earth's past. These were pioneers, commanders, engineers, and thinkers who had all built this Dominion piece by piece. They argued about timing, about how far to push, about whether to reveal themselves in peace or in strength. Some believed the Dominion should open its arms to other species trapped under the Council's rigid order, offering them a chance at freedom. Others whispered that freedom could not exist without power, and that power required proving humanity was not to be challenged. In the back of those debates lay memories of Earth itself. The homeworld was still caught in an uneasy position, half bowing to Council pressure while secretly supplying the Dominion with resources and people. To the average citizen on Earth, life still looked ordinary. Markets, cities, oceans untouched by war. But beneath that surface ran currents of unease. Everyone knew their species had been cast out, marked as dangerous. Everyone also knew that humans had never stayed in chains for long. Beyond the leaders, beyond the capitals, life inside the Dominion took on its own rhythm. Miners in the asteroid belts worked beside engineers who smuggled parts into secret shipyards. Farmers grew food beneath artificial suns on terraformed moons. Children grew up without ever seeing alien patrols hovering above their skies. In those quiet places, humanity felt whole, unobserved, free. But even there, rumors spread like wildfire. People spoke of the flagship, of fleets hidden in the dark, of plans whispered in back rooms. Some dreamed of liberation. Others feared the wrath the Council would unleash once it discovered the truth. Suspense hung in the air like the silence before a storm. Among the Dominion's fleets were men and women who had given everything to the cause. Pilots who had trained in secrecy for years, never knowing if they would one day be called to fight. Engineers who had left behind families on Earth, choosing exile so their skills could build something greater. Soldiers who carried no flag of old nations, only the quiet oath that humanity's survival mattered above all else. They were not united by governments or borders. They were united by the belief that if they did nothing, their species would remain in chains forever. The Council's watchful eyes were not blind, though. Whispers had already reached its chambers, carried by merchants and spies who had seen too much. Strange ships sighted far from approved human sectors, supply lines stretching deeper into uncharted space, worlds claimed without Council approval. But arrogance blinded them as much as caution. Many among the alien delegates dismissed the stories as exaggerations. Others argued that humans lacked the resources to defy the Council so boldly. And a few feared the truth but dared not speak it, because to admit humanity's dominion existed was to admit the Council had failed. That denial bought humanity time, but it also increased the stakes. Every moment of silence gave us more room to build, to prepare. But it also meant that when the moment of revelation came, it would come like lightning, sudden and undeniable. No negotiation could soften the impact. No quiet deal could erase the sight of fleets that should not exist. Humanity was standing at the edge of discovery, and once we stepped forward, there would be no return to shadows. In the Dominion's hidden command centers, preparations reached fever pitch. Fleets were tested in secret maneuvers. Colonies stockpiled resources. Messages were sent across encrypted channels, their words filled with urgency. Be ready. The flagship itself remained silent in its dock, a sleeping giant awaiting its first breath of open space. Engineers swore it was nearly complete, but every day of delay added to the tension. Everyone knew that once it left its hidden cradle, the galaxy would no longer be able to look away. Yet within all this preparation, there were cracks of uncertainty. Not every human agreed with the Dominion's path. Some believed the Council had been right, that humanity was too reckless, too willing to gamble with fire. Others feared that by building this Dominion in secret, we had already chosen war, whether we admitted it or not. These voices were few, but they lingered like shadows, reminders that even within humanity, doubt remained. And doubt could be dangerous when silence had to be kept at all costs. There were also mysteries that had not yet been answered. How much did the Council truly know? How many spies had already slipped into our colonies, gathering information, feeding it back to alien leaders who sat in judgment? And what of the other species, those who lived under the Council's authority but resented its chains? Would they see humanity as allies if we revealed ourselves? Or would they side with the Council, too afraid of change? Those questions were knives waiting to be turned. The flagship became more than just a ship. It became the symbol of all those questions, all that fear, all that hope. Its hull bore no name yet, because no name could capture what it was meant to be. Some wanted it called a weapon. Others wanted it called a beacon. But in silence, it became something more dangerous. It became a promise. When it rose into the void, it would carry with it not just human steel, but the unspoken vow that humanity would no longer accept exile. In secret chambers, the Dominion's leaders began to speak of first contact, not the kind written in textbooks, but the kind that would shatter illusions. They spoke of which world the flagship should reveal itself near, what words should accompany its presence, what fleets would stand ready in the shadows. Every plan came with risks, every choice with dangers. Yet one truth bound them all. Waiting forever was no longer an option. And so, in the hidden docks beneath the shadow of the gas giant, the ship remained, its engines humming softly in the dark. Workers moved across its surface like ants, sealing hulls, aligning weapons, checking systems. Pilots trained in simulators, rehearsing maneuvers they might one day need in real battles. Leaders watched in silence, their faces lit by the glow of data feeds and star maps. The entire Dominion held its breath. The galaxy thought humanity had been silenced. But the silence was only the pause before the storm. And in that pause, the question grew sharper with every passing day. When the flagship finally left its cradle and revealed the Dominion to the galaxy, would it mark the dawn of freedom? Or the beginning of a war the stars had never seen before? The answer was not yet clear. But the engines of destiny were already warming. The flagship was no longer just a ship in a hidden dock. It had become a shadow over every conversation, every plan, every decision inside the Dominion. Its silence was both comfort and threat. Comfort, because it meant humanity still controlled its own secret. Threat, because the longer it waited, the closer the galaxy came to stumbling upon it. The conflict now was not simply between humanity and the Galactic Council. It was within us. A constant tug-of-war between caution and boldness, secrecy and revelation, peace and war. Inside the council chambers of the Dominion's hidden capital, the arguments had grown sharper. One side urged patience. They wanted more colonies built, more fleets hidden, more strength gathered before stepping into the light. The other side, just as passionate, believed delay was dangerous. They argued that if the council discovered us before we revealed ourselves, we would lose control of the story. To them, the flagship had to rise soon, not just as a ship, but as a declaration of existence. Every passing day tightened the coil of tension until it felt ready to snap. The fleet commanders were among the loudest voices pressing for action. They trained pilots daily, ran silent maneuvers, tested weapons, but they knew all their preparation meant nothing if the galaxy never saw it. The soldiers were restless, their loyalty burning, but their patience thin. They had sworn to protect humanity's dominion, but to protect it, they first needed it acknowledged. Each time they returned from training exercises, their eyes would drift toward the massive silhouette of the flagship, waiting, waiting, waiting. It became their silent commander, a leader that had not yet spoken. Yet in the corridors of civilian life, the picture was different. Farmers on distant colonies, miners in asteroid belts, teachers raising the next generation, they did not see the flagship as strategy. They saw it as a gamble. Their lives depended on secrecy, on avoiding the council's gaze, and the thought of revealing the Dominion terrified them. Families whispered about what would happen if war came. They remembered Earth's history, the endless conflicts that had scarred humanity before the stars had ever been reached. To them, the flagship was not only a symbol of strength, but of the danger that strength would invite. Beyond humanity's borders, stories grew stranger. Merchant ships reported seeing council patrols moving closer to the edges of our hidden territories. Scouts spoke of alien fleets searching empty systems, as though hunting for something invisible. It was becoming clear that the council's denial was cracking. They had not spoken of it openly, but they were looking. And if they found even a glimpse of the Dominion's truth, the silence would end in fire. Inside the Galactic Council itself, whispers had turned into suspicion. A few alien delegates demanded investigations into human activities, citing sightings and intercepted transmissions. Others dismissed the claims, insisting humans lacked the unity to build anything beyond their scattered colonies. But there were voices, low, cautious voices, that warned of danger. They remembered the wars on Earth, the resilience that humans had shown time and again. They feared what would happen if a species so restless had been pushed into exile and forced to forge its own path. Yet the council's structure was slow, burdened by rules and procedures. For every warning spoken, months of debate followed, and in that time, humanity built more. One subplot began to unfold in the shadows. Not all humans were loyal to the Dominion. Within the colonies, a few secret groups still believed in reconciliation with the Council. They believed humanity should seek acceptance, even if it meant dismantling what had been built in secret. These groups sent messages, encrypted and dangerous, to alien contacts willing to listen. They promised cooperation, hinted at weaknesses, begged for a chance to be welcomed back. But their actions were double-edged. If discovered by the Dominion, they would be branded traitors. If ignored by the council, they would vanish into silence. And so, they lived in constant fear, torn between loyalty to their species and loyalty to their vision of peace. Meanwhile, a different conflict brewed within the Dominion's military. The younger generation of pilots and officers saw the flagship as destiny. They were eager to test themselves against alien fleets, to prove humanity's strength. But older veterans, many who had lived through the earliest struggles on Mars or Luna, were less certain. They remembered the cost of overconfidence, the danger of assuming strength was enough. They warned their commanders that rushing into conflict could destroy everything they had built. This generational divide created tension in strategy rooms where discipline clashed with ambition. And then there was the question of other species. Rumors spread of alien races who had grown tired of council authority. Whispers suggested that some secretly hoped humanity's dominion was real, that maybe the exiled species would challenge the council and shatter its grip. Spies carried these whispers back to the Dominion, and they sparked debates. Should humanity reveal itself as a liberator, offering alliances to those trapped under council rule? Or should it reveal itself as untouchable, a force too powerful to challenge? Each option came with risks. Each step tangled the web of possible futures. The flagship itself became a place of secrets. Deep inside its halls, crews trained in silence, preparing for missions they did not yet know. Some were told they would one day escort diplomats. Others were told they would fight. The truth was kept from most, because even within the Dominion, not everyone could be trusted with the full scope of the plan. The flagship's captain, chosen in silence by the Dominion's leaders, walked its unfinished corridors at night, feeling the weight of command before it had even begun. Every bolt, every circuit, every weapon installed on that ship was a choice made in defiance. And the captain knew that when it launched, the responsibility of humanity's future would rest on its bridge. But the greatest conflict was not in the shipyards or the chambers of leaders. It was in the hearts of the people. They had been told they were banned, told they were dangerous, told the galaxy had no place for them. Now they faced the truth that they had built their own place, stronger and freer than anything the council allowed. But freedom carried weight. Freedom meant danger. And the fear that lived in every colony, on every hidden world, was the same. If the council came with fleets, would humanity's dominion survive the storm? The suspense only grew with every passing day. Patrols reported unidentified signals at the edge of controlled systems. Civilians whispered of spies caught and quietly removed. Leaders debated endlessly, knowing that hesitation itself could be a weapon against them. And through it all, the flagship remained in silence, its dark hull a promise waiting to be kept. The galaxy was closing in. The Dominion was preparing to step out of shadows. The conflict was no longer just about survival. It was about identity, about what humanity would choose to become when it could no longer hide. Some dreamed of liberation, some feared war, and some prepared for both. But no one could escape the truth. The storm was coming, and when it broke, no world, human or alien, would remain untouched. The hum of the flagship's engines no longer felt like background noise. It pulsed through the Dominion like a heartbeat, growing louder with each passing day. Everyone knew the silence could not hold forever. The council was circling closer, their patrols sweeping deeper into the void. Reports came in daily, strange signals, unfamiliar ships, encrypted transmissions caught on the edge of human space. The net was tightening, and the leaders of the Dominion had to decide whether to wait for the inevitable strike or reveal themselves on their own terms. The tension built with every secret meeting, every whispered plan. The debates among the Dominion's leaders had shifted from words to ultimatums. One faction demanded the flagship rise immediately, not in war but in undeniable presence, to force the council to acknowledge what humanity had built. Another faction urged restraint, warning that a premature reveal would trigger the very war they feared. Voices clashed in the hidden chambers, some speaking with fire, others with quiet dread. Yet even as they argued, the truth pressed down on them. Time was no longer their ally. The fleets hidden in the dark prepared relentlessly. Pilots were ordered to keep their ships on standby, drills increasing until exhaustion became routine. Colonies stockpiled food and fuel, preparing for sieges that might last years. Every system of the Dominion felt the weight of coming change. Markets grew quiet, families whispered at night, and workers in shipyards labored with a desperation that carried no joy. They all knew something was coming, but no one could say when or how it would begin. Suspense hung over entire worlds, like a storm cloud waiting to break. Among the soldiers and civilians alike, rumors filled the silence. Some claimed the Council had already discovered the Dominion and was only waiting to strike with overwhelming force. Others whispered that spies had been uncovered in colonies, feeding information back to alien hands. There were even darker rumors that not all humans within the Dominion were loyal, that some sought to dismantle everything built in secret. These whispers fueled paranoia. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. Trust became fragile, replaced by fear that betrayal might come from within before the Council even fired a shot. The captain of the flagship walked its vast corridors each night, feeling the silence press against the hull like a weight. The crew had been chosen carefully, sworn to secrecy, their lives bound to the ship even before it left the dock. Yet even among them, the tension was heavy. Some spoke in hushed tones of glory and freedom, of the moment humanity would finally step forward. Others feared the cost, wondering if their ship would be the spark that ignited a war humanity could not hope to control. The captain felt both truths pressing down, pride at what they had built, and fear of what it might bring. Then came the first undeniable sign. A merchant convoy traveling near the edge of Dominion space reported being intercepted by a Council patrol. Unlike before, the patrol did not simply warn them away. It scanned every vessel, interrogated every crew member, and searched for evidence of forbidden expansion. Though the convoy escaped without violence, the message was clear. The Council was no longer pretending ignorance. They were hunting, and if they found even a fragment of the truth, humanity's dominion would be exposed not by choice, but by force. The news spread like fire. Colonies braced for discovery. The Dominion's leaders gathered in emergency councils, their arguments sharper, their voices strained. Some pressed harder than ever to reveal the flagship and seize control of the narrative. Others argued that war was certain, and the only option was to strike first, before the Council's fleets closed in. For every voice urging boldness, another warned of destruction. The divisions grew deeper, but time was slipping away. The Council's own chambers were stirring as well. Reports had piled too high to be ignored. Delegates demanded action, calling humanity a threat to the balance of the galaxy. Some called for sanctions, others for fleets to be mobilized. A few quieter voices suggested negotiation, but they were drowned out by fear and pride. The image of humanity as reckless, uncontrollable, and dangerous had already taken root. For many in the Council, the ban had been a warning unheeded, and now they believed it was time to enforce it with force. The decision loomed, waiting to crash down on humanity like a hammer. Inside the Dominion, the ordinary people felt the pressure most. On colonies far from the hidden fleet, families packed emergency supplies. Some fled to deeper systems, hoping the Council would never reach them. Others chose to stay, refusing to abandon the homes they had carved from nothing. For them, the Dominion was not just a political project. It was their life, their future, their proof that humanity could thrive without permission. They would not give it up easily, even if it meant facing the full might of the galaxy. The tension grew unbearable when scouts reported a Council fleet moving toward one of the Dominion's outer colonies. The fleet was small, too small to be an invasion force, but large enough to send a message. It was no longer a question of if the Council had discovered them. It was only a question of how soon they would act. The Dominion's leaders argued deep into the night, maps and reports spread across tables, voices rising as they weighed impossible choices. Should they confront the fleet openly, risking war? Should they remain silent, hoping to delay discovery a little longer? Or should they send the flagship, unveiling it as a shield for the people? Every choice carried risk. Every option could lead to disaster. The flagship's engines were tested again, this time not in silence but in readiness. The ship's massive systems came online, power flowing through circuits designed to outlast anything the Council could throw against it. The crew moved with precision, strapping into stations, running final drills, knowing that the time for secrecy was almost over. The ship was still docked, but the air around it vibrated with tension, as if even the void itself was waiting for what came next. Across the Dominion, messages spread quietly. Be ready. Pilots were ordered to stay with their ships, families told to remain close to shelters, leaders instructed to prepare for announcements that could shatter their lives. The Dominion had built itself in silence, but silence was no longer safety. The storm was moving too close. Humanity could no longer hide. In the Council's chambers, final debates dragged on. Some delegates shouted for fleets to crush humanity before it grew any stronger. Others hesitated, fearful of what humanity might have already built. No one had seen the flagship. No one knew the scale of the Dominion's fleets, but fear filled the gaps in knowledge. Fear turned hesitation into anger, and anger pushed the Council closer to a decision that could ignite the stars. And in that fragile pause, with fleets moving, colonies bracing, and leaders divided, the flagship prepared to rise. Its engines glowed brighter than ever before, illuminating the dock with a cold blue light. The crew took their positions, silent but ready, their faces tight with anticipation. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, waiting to see what humanity would choose. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. The Council's fleet moved closer to the outer colony. The Dominion's leaders stood locked in their final arguments. The people of the colonies held their breath. And in the hidden dock, the flagship's captain gave the first quiet order that would begin to change everything. The storm had reached its peak. The silence was ending, and the galaxy itself was about to witness the moment humanity's dominion stepped into the light. The flagship's engines rumbled like a storm caged within steel. But just as the order to prepare for launch rippled through its corridors, a new report arrived that shook the Dominion to its core. The Council fleet approaching the outer colony had not come alone. Hidden among its ships, cloaked and silent, were vessels of a design humanity had never seen before. Scouts sent to track them barely escaped, reporting sleek hulls and strange energy signatures unlike any Council technology known. The implication was chilling. The Council had not only mobilized against humanity, it had brought something new, something built in secret. Just as humanity had built the Dominion, the news spread through the hidden halls of leadership like wildfire. Suspicion turned into dread. For years, humanity had believed it was the only one breaking the rules, the only species building in silence outside of Council law. But now the evidence suggested otherwise. Had the Council been preparing for this all along, hiding weapons while pretending to enforce peace? Or worse, had another alien faction emerged, working with the Council in the shadows to ensure humanity never rose? The questions carried no answers, only fear, and the fragile unity of the Dominion trembled under the weight of this revelation. The fleet commanders demanded immediate action. If the Council had developed new weapons, humanity could not afford to wait. The flagship had to rise now to prove humanity's strength before the Council tested its own. But others argued that charging blindly into conflict would be suicide. They demanded more reconnaissance, more patience, more certainty. The arguments grew louder, sharper, until it seemed the leaders might fracture entirely. In their silence, the truth became clear. The real danger was not only the Council's fleets. It was division within humanity itself. The outer colony at the center of the crisis became a boiling point. Families packed their lives into crates, waiting for evacuation that might never come. Soldiers dug defenses into the soil of a world that was never meant to be a battlefield. Every communication that reached them carried two messages: hold fast and prepare for the unknown. Yet no one on that colony truly believed they could resist if the Council's new ship struck. They knew they were the bait, held on the line until the Dominion decided whether to fight or flee. In the shadows of the flagship's dock, another layer of the plot twisted into view. Security teams uncovered encrypted transmissions leaking from within the Dominion itself. The source was human, not alien. Someone inside the hidden networks had been sending information to the Council for months, maybe years. The traitor had fed details of ship movements, colony positions, and perhaps even the existence of the flagship itself. The betrayal struck deeper than any enemy fleet. Trust shattered, and paranoia spread through the Dominion like wildfire. If spies had already revealed their secrets, then the Dominion might not be the hunter, it might already be the hunted. The captain of the flagship received the report in silence, staring at the glowing screen that carried the evidence. It confirmed every fear, every suspicion whispered in the dark. Humanity was not united. It had been bleeding information to its enemy, and now the Council was moving with knowledge no outsider should have. The captain's knuckles whitened as the truth set in. The Dominion was not preparing for a clean reveal. It was walking into a trap. Meanwhile, deep within the Galactic Council, debates reached a fever pitch. Delegates argued furiously over how far to go. Some demanded immediate destruction of the Dominion, insisting humanity could never be trusted. Others whispered uneasily about the new ships hidden in the fleet. Not all members of the Council had approved them, and some feared what it meant that such weapons had been built without public knowledge. Division was spreading on both sides of the conflict. Humanity faced betrayal within, and the Council faced fractures it could not admit aloud. The second twist of the story began to sink in. This was not simply a conflict between humanity and the Council. It was a collision of secrets, a war of shadows where both sides had broken the very laws they claimed to uphold. Humanity had built a dominion in exile. The Council had built fleets in silence. Both sides had betrayed the promise of peace, and now the stars themselves trembled at what would come when those secrets finally collided. Back in the Dominion, suspicion became the true enemy. Entire colonies began to question their neighbors. Was the traitor a worker in the mines, sending signals from deep tunnels? Was it a soldier in the fleets whispering locations to alien patrols? Or was it someone high in the Council of Leaders using every debate as cover for betrayal? Investigations tore through communities, hunting for signs of disloyalty. Yet the harder they searched, the more the people felt the grip of fear. Trust, once the Dominion's greatest strength, was crumbling before the first shot of war had even been fired. The flagship's crew felt the tension most of all. They had sworn loyalty in silence, bound by secrecy, yet now even among them suspicion grew. Every glance, every word carried an edge of doubt. The captain knew that a ship could not launch into the unknown with a crew divided by mistrust. Yet time was running out. The Council's new ships were moving closer. The outer colony had days at most, and every moment wasted brought humanity closer to the jaws of destruction. Then came the most chilling report of all. The scouts who had tracked the Council's strange ships intercepted fragments of communication. The ships were not just weapons, they were test beds for something greater. They carried technology the Council had always forbidden. Hybrid systems blending biology and machinery, living weapons designed to adapt in ways no machine should. The revelation spread through the Dominion like a thunderclap. The Council had not just broken its own laws. It had built something monstrous, something it would never have tolerated in any other species, and it had built it to crush humanity. The Dominion's leaders stared at the evidence in silence. The ban had always been about control, about fear that humanity could not be trusted with power. But now the mask had slipped. The Council's hypocrisy stood exposed. They had denied humanity the right to grow while secretly arming themselves with forbidden technology. It was no longer simply exile. It was betrayal. The Dominion had been forged in defiance, but now it burned with anger. Yet anger was not enough to solve the crisis. The Council's fleet was approaching. The traitor within remained hidden. The colonies were bracing for impact. And the flagship, the symbol of humanity's dominion, stood ready to rise but still trapped in the web of uncertainty. Every step forward seemed to open new dangers, every choice carrying risks that could decide the fate of billions. The storm had deepened into something darker. Humanity's dominion was no longer facing a single enemy. It was caught in the clash of shadows, with betrayal inside, weapons unknown outside, and time running out. The flagship's engines glowed brighter, its captain prepared for the moment of decision, but no one could say if it would rise into victory or into fire. The galaxy held its breath as the knife edge of conflict sharpened. The second twist had changed everything. Humanity was no longer just a banned species building in secret. It was the spark caught in a storm of hidden lies, about to ignite a fire that could consume the stars. The flagship finally roared to life, its massive frame rising from the hidden docks like a black mountain tearing free from the earth. For years, it had been a symbol, a myth whispered across colonies and outposts, but now it stood as reality, humanity's dominion taking form against the weight of the Council. Every eye watched as its engines carved through the void, as its shadow stretched across the stars. The time for secrecy was gone. Humanity was no longer hiding. The Council fleet arrived in formation, their ships arranged like a wall of judgment across the sky. At the center were the strange new vessels, their hulls glowing with faint pulses of organic light as if they were alive. The moment both sides came into range, silence fell. No words were spoken, no signals exchanged. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Humanity's flagship turned its bow toward the enemy, its weapons primed, its crew ready for what everyone knew would decide more than just one battle. This was the moment that would decide whether humanity had a future or none at all. The first strike came not from humanity, but from the Council. Their new ship surged forward with inhuman speed, moving faster than anything the Dominion had seen before. Beams of searing light split the void, tearing through the shields of smaller human escorts. But the flagship held, its reinforced armor absorbing the blows as its own cannons fired back. The shock waves rippled across space, stars flashing like silent witnesses to a war that had been building for generations. The colony below became the backdrop to the conflict. Families huddled in shelters, watching the heavens burn with streaks of fire. Soldiers on the ground felt the tremors as ships above traded blows. For them, this was no longer about survival. It was about belief. Every child and elder watching knew that if the flagship fell, so would the dream of humanity's dominion. Inside the Council, chaos reigned. Delegates who had opposed the secret fleet demanded explanations, furious that forbidden weapons had been unleashed without their approval. Some called for retreat, others demanded annihilation, but control had already slipped from their hands. The fleet was no longer commanded by debate. It was driven by desperation, by fear that if humanity rose, the Council would lose its power forever. The battle intensified. Human ships swarmed around the flagship like wolves protecting their leader, striking at the edges of the Council's formation. The new vessels retaliated, their strange hybrid systems adapting with terrifying speed. Where one had been damaged, another shifted its armor as if learning from the wound. The Dominion fought fiercely, but every victory seemed to cost more than it gained. Then the betrayal revealed itself. A hidden signal pulsed from within the flagship itself, guiding the enemy's fire toward weak points that should have been impossible to detect. The traitor had been there all along, buried within the heart of humanity's most powerful ship. The crew realized too late as enemy beams tore through the hull, shaking the vessel with brutal force. Panic surged, but the captain remained still, his voice steady as he gave a command that silenced every fear. Cut the signal. Lock every channel. We finish this on our terms. The traitor was dragged from the shadows, caught in the act of sending the final coordinates. To the shock of many, it was not a soldier or engineer, but one of the Council's own envoys, someone who had argued for caution, who had urged delay. They had never believed humanity could win and had sold its secrets in return for survival. The captain did not order execution, only silence. There was no time for vengeance, only for the battle that still raged outside. The flagship, damaged but unbroken, unleashed its full arsenal. Weapons that had been hidden for decades fired in unison, piercing through the enemy's strongest shields. For the first time, the Council's new ships faltered. Their organic cores screamed with energy, their hulls buckling as the Dominion's fury struck. Humanity had always been underestimated, always forced into exile, but in that moment its defiance burned brighter than any star. Yet just as victory seemed within reach, the final twist emerged. One of the Council's hybrid ships broke formation, not to attack, but to signal. The intercepted message stunned both sides. The ship was not entirely Council-made. It carried within it fragments of technology not from the Council at all, but from another source, something older, something buried. Humanity was not the only one who had built in secret. The Council had not created these weapons from nothing. They had unearthed them. The revelation struck like lightning. Humanity's battle was not just against the Council, it was against forces the galaxy had long forgotten. If these ships were relics of another age, then the war had awoken something far larger than either side had prepared for. The captain's eyes hardened as he realized the truth. Even if humanity won here, this was only the beginning. But in that moment, the battle had to be won. The flagship surged forward, its engines burning hotter than ever, cutting a path through the enemy's line. Human ships followed, striking with every ounce of strength left. The Council's fleet began to fracture, its strange vessels collapsing under the weight of wounds they could not heal fast enough. The sky filled with fire, the colony below bathed in light as the clash reached its peak. At last, the Council fleet broke. Ships scattered, retreating into the void, dragging their damaged hybrids with them. Humanity had held its ground. The flagship, scarred and battered, still stood in orbit, its shadow stretching over the colony it had sworn to protect. For the first time in generations, humanity had not only survived, it had prevailed. The people cheered, their voices echoing across comms and colonies. Yet the celebration carried a weight, a knowledge that victory had come at a cost. The traitor revealed the cracks within. The enemy's weapons revealed truths yet to be faced. Humanity had won the battle, but the war was no longer simply with the Council. It was with whatever ancient force had built the technology now stirring in the void. The captain stood on the bridge, watching the stars through fractured glass. His crew, exhausted but unbroken, waited for his words. "We've proven we can stand," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the ship. "But what we face next is greater than the Council. We've only lit the fire. Now we must decide whether we can endure the storm it brings." And in the silence that followed, the final twist lingered like a shadow. Humanity had risen, but in doing so, it had awakened something older, something watching from the dark beyond the stars. The victory was real, the dominion secured, but the true conflict had only just begun. The fires of battle slowly dimmed, leaving only drifting wreckage and the faint glow of damaged hulls scattered across the void. Humanity's flagship held its orbit, scarred but alive, a silent declaration that exile had not broken us. For hours, the crew worked to stabilize systems, patching leaks, sealing corridors, and tending to the wounded. In the colony below, people emerged from shelters, staring at the night sky where streaks of fire still burned. They saw not fear, but proof that humanity had stood against the greatest force the galaxy could summon and endured. The Council had fled, its fleet fractured, its hybrid vessels dragged back into retreat. For the first time, the Dominion had forced the galaxy to acknowledge its existence not as a rogue colony or a hidden rebellion, but as a true power. The Council's silence afterward was heavy, filled with the weight of shame. Their attempts to ban and control humanity had only forged something stronger than they had ever imagined. Yet the revelation of their secret weapons lingered like a shadow over every victory song. Humanity had not only fought the Council, it had fought against something older, something that whispered of dangers even the Council feared. In the days that followed, the Dominion rebuilt. Shipyards worked without rest, salvaging wrecks and reforging them into new fleets. Colonies once forced into hiding now raised their banners openly, declaring themselves part of the Dominion without fear of alien reprisal. For the first time, children grew up beneath skies where human ships patrolled freely, not as trespassers but as protectors. The ban was broken, the sentence of exile overturned not by petition or diplomacy but by action. Humanity had proven that its destiny could not be dictated by a council of outsiders. Yet inside the halls of the flagship, conversations turned toward a heavier question. What had the Council truly unleashed with those hybrid vessels? The fragments of captured technology were studied in secret, and engineers found patterns too complex, too deliberate, to be of alien design. It was not innovation, it was excavation. The Council had dug into the past, pulling weapons from an era long forgotten, perhaps from a civilization that had ruled before any of them. And if they had found one cache, there might be more, hidden across the galaxy, waiting to be awakened. Humanity realized it was not simply facing rivals in politics, but forces buried in the dark that could reshape everything they knew. The traitor, once unmasked, was placed on trial. The Dominion did not seek blood, but truth. Under questioning, it became clear that the envoy had never believed in humanity's strength. They had been promised survival in exchange for betrayal, convinced that humanity's dominion could not stand against the Council. Their confession struck at the heart of every listener, not because of the treachery itself, but because it revealed how deeply fear still lingered in human hearts. Not all believed in the dream. Not all trusted that this path could end in survival. It was a reminder that unity was fragile, and that the Dominion's greatest challenge might not come from outside, but from within. Despite this, hope spread faster than doubt. Colonies once isolated sent envoys to join the new order. Merchant fleets that had lived in the shadows now flew openly, their cargoes guarded by human escorts. For every scar left by battle, there was also pride. People no longer spoke of being banned or forbidden. They spoke of being free. The Dominion was not built on conquest or obedience. It was built on resilience, on the refusal to bow when told to kneel. That truth resonated with every citizen, from the farthest miner in the asteroid belts to the leaders standing inside command halls. But the whispers of the ancient threat could not be silenced. The flagship's crew, those who had faced the hybrids firsthand, carried the knowledge that something larger stirred beyond the horizon. Reports trickled in from distant scouts. Strange energy readings, derelict structures orbiting dead stars, fragments of metal not matching any known design. Humanity had won its freedom, but freedom had opened the door to mysteries the galaxy itself had long buried. The Council's fear of us had been born not just from arrogance, but perhaps from knowledge they had never dared to share. In private chambers, leaders debated the future. Some argued for caution, that the Dominion should focus on strengthening itself, consolidating its gains before chasing after ancient ghosts. Others urged boldness, claiming that if the Council had awakened something dangerous, it was humanity's duty to uncover the truth before it was used again. Between these voices, the captain of the flagship spoke simply, "We cannot run from what has already found us. The Council's mistake has already touched our people. If we do nothing, it will return. If we face it, we may shape what comes next." And so, preparations began for a new journey, not of rebellion or survival, but of discovery. Fleets were assigned to patrol the edges of known space, not just to defend, but to seek. Engineers worked to adapt the fragments of ancient technology, not to wield as weapons, but to understand what they represented. Humanity had risen as a dominion, but now it faced a choice: to rule only its own worlds, or to step forward into the unknown with the same defiance that had carried it this far. For the people of the Dominion, life slowly began to settle into something resembling peace. Children ran through streets of cities untouched by alien law. Farmers harvested crops on new soil, knowing their labor belonged to no one but their own kind. Workers stood proud in shipyards where the hulls they built carried human flags. It was not perfection, and doubts still lingered, but there was a sense of belonging that had never existed before. Humanity was no longer defined by the Council's rejection. It was defined by its own will. The captain of the flagship, standing once more on its repaired bridge, looked out at the stars. They were no longer distant or forbidden. They were waiting. Every scar on the ship, every name etched into its walls, told the story of how humanity had fought not just for survival, but for the right to decide its own future. The Dominion was not perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. The galaxy would remember the battle, the day when the banned species stood against the Council and did not break. But for humanity, the true lesson was simpler. Freedom is never given. It is built. Every colony, every ship, every life lived without chains was proof that exile had only made us stronger. And though new challenges would come, though mysteries still waited in the dark, humanity would meet them not as outcasts, but as a Dominion united. As the flagship prepared for its next voyage, its engines humming like a heartbeat, the crew carried no illusions. The Council would return perhaps with more allies, perhaps with more secrets unearthed. The ancient threat hinted at by their hybrid ships might rise again. But humanity was no longer afraid of bans or borders. We had faced the weight of the galaxy and endured. The stars stretched before us, endless and unknown. And for the first time in history, they were not a cage, but a frontier. Humanity had carved its own place among them, not by permission, but by choice. The dominion was real. The future was ours. And whatever shadows waited beyond the edge of the map, we would meet them as we always had, together, unbroken, and unafraid. That was how humanity's exile ended, not with silence, but with a voice that could no longer be ignored. A voice carried by a people who had been banned, but who had built a dominion instead. A people who had chosen not just to survive, but to rise. And in that choice, the galaxy itself would never be the same.